Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about Fistfuls of Dice. Do you love them or hate them? So I've been exploring some rule sets to do with my Wars of the Roses collection, and the rule set that I'm currently looking at has basically a single D12 determining actions. So it's basically opposed dice rolls for both sides. With modifiers, of course, and you know, I was looking online, having a look, because it's different to some of the games that I've played, wargaming games that I've played, and I realised that there's something of a them and us, a Marmite type effect on wargamers. So there's when you go onto certain forums and you look up this subject, and you get very much a love it or hate it approach to fistfuls of dice or individual opposed dice as a method of determining an outcome for melees and so on. And you know, and I've been aware of this for a while because it comes up all the time. But as someone who got into the hobby 40 plus years ago, playing role-playing games where determining the outcomes of actions is commonly done on one dice, a D20 for D&D, you know, it is a bit unusual to me. Having said that, since I've been a wargamer, probably all of the war games that I've played have been the Fistful of Dice type games, where you know, you end up rolling you know, literally a fistful of D6s or whatever the dice happens to be to determine the outcome of a melee, or maybe even saves if those rules include that sort of thing. So this sort of lemon us, this Marmite type reaction is a bit unusual to me, because I've seen both camps, although I've not played any war games up till now that use single opposed dice rolls. But of course there are, across the games that I've played anyway, there are three basic types of options that you can use for determining the outcome of a melee, for instance. So as mentioned, the rule set that I'm looking at right now uses opposed dices. It can be a D6, or in this case it's a D12, but essentially you add some modifiers, both players roll one dice each, and the difference determines the level of the victory of one side or another. Now, you know, this isn't to everyone's taste, it has to be said. However, it's a very simple mechanic. And it can produce wildly different results. You know, one person rolls a max and the other rolls a minimum. The difference can be huge. But of course, it's how the rules treat that difference. It's not necessarily per point of difference on the dice. It can be bands of difference to determine the extremes. But you can get some very extreme results with single opposed dice rolls to determine outcomes. And then the other method that is perhaps more common, and mostly, many people who will have encountered, is paired dice. So you take advantage of that bell curve that results when you have two dice. So in other words, a lot of dice results will be somewhere in the middle. So you can even out, you can push most of the dice results towards the centre, but still allow for those extremes. And then you adjust perhaps the number of dice being rolled. There'll be adjustments for pluses and minus modifiers to that dice roll. Again, you can still get some extremes, but they're going to be really very rare, because the chances are that your paired dice roll will be somewhere in the middle. And that's a popular mechanic. Lots of game systems use it. Lots of game systems I've played have used it. But then there's the alternative, which is literally fistfuls of dice. So a lot of the game systems that I've played, and that's probably because Posty, Stuart, favours this in his own rule sets, is the bucket of dice or fistful of dice approach, where you get perhaps so many dice for the whole unit, plus more for the men, and various other dice that might get added on or taken away depending on the circumstances, and the other player does the same, and then you might not end up with the same number of dice each, but you might also have different targets to reach. One side might have to roll 5+, another roll 6 on a D6. And then, of course, you toss your loads of dice and you work out the differences. And it's still possible, but plenty of games where the underdog with fewer dice and the harder target to reach has still managed to beat the one with the more dice and the lower target. But it's not to everyone's taste, and it does involve a lot of admin in some respects, trying to remember all the different modifiers and what dice you take in and take out. So when we play these games down the Shed of War, for instance, Stuart will be spending most of the game working out how many dice each player should have, and what we're supposed to be our target is for rolling. That takes a lot of time, and although you learn what the various modifiers are going along, it still is more complicated than something like a single opposed dice roll and a table with modifiers, for instance. Now this is where I'm going to get a little bit controversial. I've decided I don't care what system you use, because they're all achieving the same result. They're all trying to produce a decision about how effective an attack was, how many attacks hit, what the end result is. So it doesn't matter which one of those three systems you're using, because they're all trying to achieve the same thing. And providing the maths has been worked out right, you're going to get results that are in keeping with the forces that you're using and the period that you're playing. And of course, how you determine how many hits or how much damage or fatigue or whatever measure it is that you're causing on an enemy unit, how you determine that doesn't really have any bearing on the tactics of the game. That's controlled by things like the movement and the rules for changing formation and all that sort of thing. So actually, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I am not a Marmite person, because I'm not picking one side or the other, because actually I don't really care what system we use so long as it works. So I'll come down off my soapbox and say, what's your opinion? Are you a Fistful of Dice type person, or do you like systems that are simple, a single opposed dice rolls or paired dice with a bell curve of the results? Have you got a preference, or like me, do you not really care what the mechanic is so long as the result works and that the overall rule set gives you a flavour of that particular period, that style of warfare and the troops and the weapons that are involved? So as always, I'd love to hear your experiences and your opinions. Are you a Marmite character? Do you fall in one camp or the other? Or like me, do you not really give a monkeys? In the end, really, all I want from my dice mechanic is that they are simple to learn, consistent in their outcome, and easy to remember. Other than that, it doesn't really matter how you get to that result, because that really doesn't give a flavour for the period or the figures that you're using. The period and the history and the mechanics of the tactics of that period aren't really determined by whether you roll a couple of dice, one dice, or a fistful of dice. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and as always, if you did, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly videos from my channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, look after yourself, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.